I'm recording. Okay, so it's gone for 4 seconds. So I'm ready to press the button. Okay.
Hang on a sec. Oh, I've started recording. Okay. Okay. Hey everybody, I'm with Dianne Chambers. Dianne Chambers and I met in some professional development training. I've invited her along to have a chat with us today. She's got an amazing program in children's coaching, born out of some very personal circumstances, which I'll let Di tell you about in just a moment. I chose Di specifically. She's coming to us from South Australia, and I wanted to bring her into this conversation about joyful teaching and joyful teachers. She's a very humble educator and will be the first one to tell you, I don't have formal qualifications, but I can tell you she has plenty of life experience and a great big heart for education. So please welcome Dianne Chambers.
Thank you so much, Jo. I'm excited to be here and to share what I know.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for you. I think we'll go on a bit of a journey with our listeners. I'll try not to dig too deep, but we'll just see where this goes. And firstly, I'd like to ask you, what inspired you to pursue a career as a supporting education in the Catholic system? What brought you to education and work in that area to start with?
Well, to be honest, I fell into that. But having said that, through a lot of learning and training, which was instigated initially through business, a lot of personal development programs and reading, I became very passionate about human nature. And about 10 years before I moved into the education system, I set a goal that I wanted to work with teenagers and their self-esteem. And so applying for a part-time job in the education system took me to that role, and the education support officer is about, working alongside children. I've actually worked from reception to year 12 in the classroom in a special ed area for a couple of years, and also with migrant children. So I've had a varied role, and I just want, and I still want to affect children in a positive way. I want children to be able to cope with life, and that's really important to me. And so when I went into the system, knowing that I wasn't a teacher, so I made a special commitment to myself that that the classrooms I worked in, the teachers were the teacher and I was the education support officer, and I worked within the environment in that classroom to the best of my ability, along with how the teacher was teaching. And the thing was, I worked differently to a lot of people, and I came from the personal development, the personal internal side of the child, and really tried to work and understand that and get onto the page of the child before moving forward with the education part of it. So, and I've always, when I was in the senior part of the school, I always considered myself as the go-between the child and the teacher, because I was able to develop a close relationship with the child, understand their learning, where sometimes they can get lost in the classroom, and then go to the teacher and sort of say, well, this is the way I see it, is there another way around this? Can we, find another way to achieve the outcomes for the child, but change the workload in a way? So, yeah, so I was a bit of we're all teachers, so teacher in a way, but also that go-between for the child and the teacher.
Just hearing you talk about it that way, and you said that there was an initial, inspiration for human nature. Did that come from your own experiences of education as a child?
To be honest, I think I've been gifted with loving people, and yeah, people have always fascinated me. I've always got on well with people. I absolutely loved raising my own 3 boys, and my middle one was a challenge. And because of the personal development that I had done to that point, I realised that I had control over the way I reacted to him. And so, and he was such a little mischief maker, and just a very self-driven child from a very young age, very young age. I learned by the time he was 3 that I was the adult. I had had experience in life. I needed to control myself and not allow him to press my buttons and react to him. So I put a lot of these practices into play with my own children, just realising that they are what they are, and we can either bang heads with them or try to understand them. And I made a conscious decision to treat everything, when he was 3, everything with love with him, because I think things could have ended up quite nasty.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So that moves me to the second question. There are some of the bigger challenges. You've talked about your relationship, particularly with your middle son, as in his very early years, until you found, systems and approaches that fitted you and in your particular situation. In terms of challenge now, what's been a challenge? In some, perhaps in the classroom, or perhaps in the work that you're doing now as you create your own programs? Have you got some challenges you've overcome that you could share with us?
Well, I've got a personal challenge that I've overcome, which has certainly impacted the drive for me to go out on my own to do some work with the kids. So firstly, I can see that in a classroom, and it's often said, we have the children for 6 hours out of 24 in a day. So one of the challenges is their home environment and so forth. So I never ever really went out of my way to try and change things. I tried to do the best with what I had, and if then we couldn't work with the parents to change things, I decided that I would give the children that I work with the best experience that they could have while they were with me, and that was the choice that I made. And I was very good at not letting children get on top of me. I learned a lot of skills. Joe, as you know, 15 years ago, 15 years ago, our youngest son, he was 21 years of age, he went on a holiday with a friend to India, and he went missing, and he's still missing to this day. And I was working in the education system at that time, and when we'd done all the initial things, and I think really I only took 3 weeks off work, because when something like that happens, you can't sit around and wallow in it all day. So I was conscious of, well, not at the time, but the trauma that I'd been through, but I didn't identify it as trauma then. I've since been able to put that label onto what we went through. But I just absolutely loved working with the children, and to me, that was a real joy in a lot of the tragedy that we were going through. But having said that, you carry this, whether it's at that time it was this sadness in the pit of my stomach. For other people, it could be anger because of things that are going on in their lives. All sorts of emotions we carry with us. And I have a very firm belief that it's not our job to dump those things on other people. And so I worked really hard to go to work in a positive frame of mind every day. I might have been feeling sad inside. The children always light your life anyway. But I had practices that I consistently did, whether it was listening to, there's a gratitude video that I listened to and I still listen to it to this day, probably not quite as often as I did then, but uplifting music, uplifting podcasts. There's so much on YouTube these days. You only have to look inside and think, what am I struggling with today? And there will be something on YouTube. But it's a matter of doing it consistently, even when you think you don't need it, because the need is to override that subconscious programming that's happening inside of you. And, you know, if it's a negative pattern that you have, we need to do something to turn that around. And, you know, children with the things they do in a classroom can just trigger you like that. And it's a matter of having yourself in a place that you can control those triggers.
Di, it's just such an incredible, it takes such incredible courage. I know it's the story that you live with and a reality that you and your family live with, but to use the spirit and the momentum of that personal tragedy and to bring it into the classroom it's just so important. That I think that in our teaching community, whether you're a supporting teacher or a mainstream teacher, whichever role it is, it's so important to hear and to share, because at the end of the day, when I hear you talk, it makes me think of what skills you're inadvertently passing on to the people with you, and to show you're a living example of showing resilience and humbleness and working with this to make a positive meaning out of what you're going through and being able to help. So thank you for sharing something so deeply personal, and I'm sure anyone listening would feel compelled to want to know more. When I first met you, I was just so personally touched in my own, this interview is not about me, but in my own life, it makes it opens the doorway for other people to be to feel more comfortable in sharing their own stories too, and that's what it's about, isn't it? It's growing together. And it's one of the virtues of education, isn't it? We're learning together, whatever our circumstances.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move to my next question, is asking you those first days when you were working in a formal education setting, is there any support that you felt you personally wanted, or for the teachers that you were working with? I would imagine you probably worked with brand new teachers, very experienced teachers, and some in between. Is there any support that you wish you either personally had, or that you wished the people around you may have had to help them in their work?
Yes, for me, I went in with this helping the human being aspect, you know, so I was passionate about that. And, you know, within a very short, and I started in the middle school, sort of probably between years 6, 7 up to 10 here in South Australia. And I quickly realised, oh my gosh, you know, kids have got assignments to do, they've got due dates to, you know, be put in. And I started to get really drawn into this time frame and, you know, the kids getting their work finished. And I was working with children that had issues. You know, they had, you know, some of them had literacy issues, some dyslexia, autism, Asperger's, all of these conditions. And I had to stop myself, you know, and I started my job and nobody actually guided me through it at all. And so I sort of pulled myself back and I thought, at the base of all of this learning, there are little human beings, and I really wanted to make a connection with these human beings. And I have this saying that I say, I find out where they are, and I wanted to move them from where they are to somewhere. Now, the difference for me and the responsible teacher in the classroom is that they have checks and balances and expectations to move children to a certain place. And I don't know that what that always serves the child myself, and that is an opinion of my own. But for me, that's how I worked, was to move them from there to somewhere, negotiate with the teachers to see if we can change what the amount of work or whatever it might have been to actually achieve what the outcomes are. Really look at the outcomes and, you know, is there only one way to achieve it, or are there other ways to achieve the outcome? So I would have loved to have had somebody to guide me through that. But to be honest, I think the way I thought of it was quite different to most people. So I don't know that anybody, I think I had to find my feet myself, but I don't know that that's always a good thing, to have a mentor and to somebody to really discuss these things with, and for them to say, look, you know, it's a really good idea. Just be careful going down that route. You know, this is what you might run into. But I just made the decision because I was nearly 50 when I went into this role. And so my attitude was, oh, well, you know, I'll do it my way and do the best that I know how. And I know that if I put a foot wrong, I'm going to get a tap on the shoulder. And I was never tapped on the shoulder in 16 years. So I figure I must have done something right.
I think so.
But some guidance, I think, you know, a mentor, some guidance to find out the lay of the land. I mean, schools are interesting places, and yeah, it's nice to have, it would be nice to have a bit of guidance. You know, probably the benefit for me was that my children had previously all gone through that school. So I knew a lot of the teachers. That's another whole interesting thing. You go into this place knowing people, but everybody's too busy to talk to you. Just, you know, yeah, it was interesting. But
that's probably a brilliant segue for me to ask you something a bit on the lighter side. Would you be able to share one of your, you know, lighter moments, a teacher-related story with us today?
Gosh, you know, a few heavy ones, but
yeah.
I was working with a very small group of people, and this is going back. In fact, I just noticed that one of the boys turned 31 today, so that's how far back it goes, and they would have probably been about 16, 17 at the time.
Right.
And so there was a group that I worked with. There was a lovely young lady that had a slight intellectual disability, because the students that we worked with in our special ed are most of them are quite able-bodied, although we did have 2 boys with muscular dystrophy that were in wheelchairs, but you know, for the most part they could understand, you know, basic education. And then another young lad I was working with cerebral palsy, and they all had a great friendship, and a lot of things that I did with them was actual life skills. You know, we'd go out doing different life skill things, and we were in the classroom this particular day, and you know, I used to like to have a bit of fun and laugh and so forth. And I was teaching them communication skills, how to introduce yourself to somebody, and all of that. And so, you know, I was standing up there and I said, like, this is how you do it. You know, my name is Di, and then I just went on and said, and I'm an alcoholic. And it just, because that's what they do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it just came out, and it was like, oh, damage control here. No, I'm not an alcoholic. I just had a vision of these kids all going home and saying, Mrs. Chambers is an alcoholic. Did you know that? I was badly trying to, you know, and these kids, like, they were, as I said, they were 16 or so at the time, so you could joke around with them, but I just really forgot where I was that particular day. I never had any recourse on that, but it was quite funny.
How did the students react? Did they get a sense there was something off there?
I think they were a bit shocked to start with, and then I think I just explained to them why that came out, and then they thought it was funny, because I can be funny and I can be firm, and sometimes some of the students with a little bit of a disability sometimes are not quite sure which way to take what, you know, until they get to know me. But yeah, we just had fun.
I'm sure you've got many. Oh goodness. after that, we'll change the tack again as we come towards the end of our time. Thank you so much for your time, by the way. As we know this year, well, we don't need to go into, what's been going. We're all well aware of what's going on. One of my main intentions to start these conversations with educators is to really propel and lift the mood from a somewhat somber year in education, depending on what you're looking at, what you're reading, what you're listening to. We do tend to hear about the challenges that children and teachers have been facing this year through COVID. My intention is to raise that vibration and to help remind ourselves what's great about education, even in these difficult times. So can you, I know you would have tons to choose from, but do you have a piece of advice that you would like to share with the people listening about teaching, about education?
Well, what I know is that life is going to present to us challenges, whether you're in the classroom, out of the classroom, and I understand teachers have more than one aspect. They have the children, they have the families to deal with. The way we think about the challenges that are in front of us is going to make the greatest difference. There is the saying, it doesn't matter what happens to you, it's how you handle it. And I have to say that I believe in that 100%. And that is why I think it is so important for people to look inside themselves and strengthen the skills, their own personal skills, because we're all going to need them in life. As I was saying to you earlier, Jo, we have a society now that only wants the good stuff in life and we don't want the bad stuff. But everything in life, there's the yin and the yang, the good, the bad, black, white. There is the opposite to everything. So nobody is going to get through life with all good and nothing bad. So we need to upskill ourselves on how to handle life and situations, and then, bring it on, because, you can, otherwise you get bogged in a negative place, which is not very becoming to the human being. It's difficult to pass positive stuff on. And mind you, children, I had a saying in my house, monkey see, monkey do. If I wanted something done, I had to be seen doing it, because, kids are not silly. You're on them about do, and they see you do the opposite. Like, they're not going to listen to what you say. They'll do what you do. And so I think it's important to be very mindful of all of these things. And I was mindful of it when I was bringing up my own children. I don't know why, but I think it's that human nature inside of me. If you expect to be treated a certain way, you need to treat people like that, and however you treat them is what you can expect back. And that goes for children as well, so that's look inside, and to fix anything, we need to straighten up get our own house in order first. And then once you're feeling happy on the inside, you can then deal with life's happenings. And in the situation with Ryan, I used to often I'd get on my soapbox at different times and be espousing all of this stuff, and then I'd have this little voice sitting on my shoulder saying, yes, but do you live that? Do you really live that? And I can honestly say that I do, because when Ryan went missing, I was able to call on all of these skills. I was able to control how I thought, which then helped me act differently. And but the preparation needs to happen before the event happens. It's a bit late to be scratching around. I mean, it's not too late, never too late for anything, but it's better if you are pre-prepared and have that little toolbox sitting there and think, oh, I can use that tool here, and oh, I can use that tool there. I often talk about the situation, like if you've got a carpenter, he goes on the job and he doesn't have any tools, well, like he's not going to be much of a carpenter. And then if you can have some carpenters with a huge big toolbox, and he goes and grabs the tools out and he's got no idea how to use them. Like, what's the use of that as well? So as human beings, I think we need to be really looking at developing a toolbox of skills to, you know, at the end of the day, teaching, you're in the profession of little human beings.
Yes.
You know, and it's human nature. So we can all, no, I won't say that, but, you know, we can read books and pass on information, but it's how you go about doing that, which brings you, the human, into the equation. I think it's really important to, you know, get an understanding of who you are as a person and understand that you're communicating with other little people.
Thank you so much. I could chat all day to you. I'm very lucky to have a personal connection with you and have many more conversations, but it's been my great pleasure to interview today, and thank you so much for your unique take on what you do and why you do it. And I hope people listening today get the sense of who you are, to know you, to meet you in person. You live your truth, and I think that's, to me, one of the reasons I was so keen to get to know you better, and to help tell one of my stories, which is, you know, why I feel joy is so important in teaching, and to have that sense of inner fortitude is so important for yourself as a person, but also when you're influencing others around you. Di, thank you so much for your time and for sharing some of your stories with us today.
My absolute pleasure, Jo. Thank you.
Thank you.